All right, time now for a closer look at our global supply chain. The attacks by Yemen's Houthi rebels on commercial vessels out there in the Red Sea have really started to complicate those shipping routes. Some vessels are avoiding the Suez Canal altogether and taking long detours around southern Africa instead. The result is driving up the time it takes to get to destinations, and that's driving up shipping rates. Lee Klaskow over at Bloomberg Intelligence joining us right now to talk a little bit more about this. And Lee, I've seen this come up a couple times already this year. There were some issues earlier this year, still issues, persistent issues with the Panama Canal, right, and folks having to reroute because of drought conditions there. Now we have this situation in the Red Sea, which is intensified enough where shippers feel they just have to avoid this area altogether. What does that add to the time it takes for them to get from, I guess, one side of the globe to the other?
Yeah, if you're going to Europe, it adds another 7 to 10 days. The United States, even more than that. So it's obviously adding time, and time is money. And you're going to see freight rates go up. When we're talking about the container industry, we've seen rates go up around 10% over the last 2 weeks. That's, a good thing for the industry because rates right now are extremely depressed, and they're in loss territory for a lot of the carriers. So this is actually coming at a good time from the carrier standpoint. Right. If we're just looking at the P&L.
At the P&L. Well, let's just stay on that topic for a second, because they also did well during the last big supply chain disruption, which was the pandemic. They did gangbusters. So when you say that earnings are depressed, is it relative to those gangbuster years in 2020, 2021, or are you talking about pre-pandemic?
No, we're talking pre-pandemic.
Oh, wow.
So they were creamy highs in 2021, 22.
That was like once in a lifetime.
Right, exactly. Once in a generation. And now we're talking about rates that are significantly lower. They're around 29% below where they were a year ago, and they're over 80% below where they were at the peak. So we're significantly a lot lower than we were when it comes to freight rates.
So contextualize this in the context of the global supply chain, because it feels like we just got finished really with the narrative of the global supply chain still being snarled up by the pandemic. What is the state of the global movement of goods right now, and what does this mean for that photo?
I think the movement of goods right now is fine. What this is going on within the Red Sea, it's starting to complicate things. What you'll see is shippers looking to make sure that they are booking maybe ahead of time than they normally would. But just remember, there's a lot of slack capacity available on the ocean. So, maybe that T-shirt might not get to Walmart. It might take an extra week and a half. I think I can wait. I think you can wait. We might have to pay a little more for that. And depending on
is it going to be relevant in a week, though, if it's like a Barbie T-shirt? you don't want that like 6 months from now. Yeah. But point taken.
But it's going to add some inflationary pressures. But, I don't want to say transitory because people get in trouble for saying that.
It's a very loaded word.
Yes, but, we do think that these costs will be short term. And then when things, quote unquote, normalize, you're going to see freight rates come back down.
And how prepared are the shippers, the fleet owners for a situation like this? Of course, they travel through these waters all the time. They're very familiar with it. What does the contingency plan look like when you have a situation like this?
Well, I think they're waiting for the governments to get involved, which we've seen the U.S. government and some of its allies get involved. I think there was a group of 10 of them to make sure that, the sea lanes are safer for ships. That could create convoys. It can create slower movement of vessels, but obviously if you're saving 7 to 15 days of travel time, it's kind of worth those slower times going through the Suez Canal. But I think they're very much prepared because they can easily say, we're not going to go there. We're going to go south around Africa and add that extra time. So, I think they're very well prepared. And like I mentioned earlier, they have a lot of capacity on the market. The container-liner industry is awash in capacity, and it's not supposed to get better probably not until 2026.
Interesting. This is something I think we're going to be talking about for a long time, definitely through 2024. I do want to pivot from that. In addition to covering the shipping industry, you cover a lot of the domestic freight carriers, including names like FedEx. We are scheduled to get FedEx earnings a little bit later tonight. And I know this is a completely different topic than what's going on out there in the Suez Canal and elsewhere here. But this is a stock that has done pretty well this year, a stock that I think has surprised a lot of folks given the new leadership and the new pivot that they've taken. What do you expect to hear tonight?
Yeah, the stock stock's on fire this year. It's up 65%, I think.
Yeah.
So it's done quite well. That's also based on a terrible year last year, so let's put that into perspective.
Yeah.
What they're really doing is they seem to be executing on their plan. They're looking to save around $6 billion in costs over the next couple of years through their Network 2.0 and Drive initiatives. And that really what's doing is taking their ground and their express network and kind of seeing if they can work together as opposed to having just overlapping networks, trying to get synergies out of those networks. And also FedEx has been run as a quote-unquote fat company, if you will, and they're kind of trimming the fat, and so that should be good. And then FedEx also benefited from UPS when UPS had the labor negotiations going on with the Teamsters, so a lot of freight was diverted to FedEx because people were afraid that maybe there might be a strike at UPS. And it remains to be seen how sticky some of that freight is, and we're going to find out how sticky that freight is at the close.
Yeah, and just for some context, you mentioned FedEx's wonderful year, up about 63% at the moment. You compare that to UPS, down about 7.2%. And you hit on what I've been wondering about, basically that market shares, those customers that they've grabbed from UPS. What's your expectation when it comes to how sticky those new customers are?
I think some will be sticky, but most will not, because they use FedEx for a reason, and that could be cost, it could be service, it could be different relationships. I mean, FedEx has a LTL business, so it could be a lot of different reasons why you use FedEx. And a lot of shippers use both companies, and they just might divert back to FedEx. So I think that I think that FedEx would have won some of it, but I think a lot of it's going to go back to UPS.
All right, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens later tonight. Lee Klaskow, the blessed of Bloomberg Intelligence, covering the transportation sector for us, and we will have full coverage of those FedEx results.